In the Wild West, one cowboy stood alone against a ruthless gang to save an Apache village. His courage turned into legend. If you love stories of bravery and sacrifice, hit like, subscribe, and tell us where you're watching from. We'd love to hear your story too. Let's get started. The year was 1874, and the sun burned hot across the endless stretch of the New Mexico desert. The land was dry, brittle with tumbleweeds rolling across empty trails where only the brave or the desperate dared to travel. James Cartwright, a lone cowboy with dust on his boots and sorrow in his eyes, rode steadily, his horse breathing heavy beneath him. He had once been a drifter with no purpose, chasing whiskey bottles and card tables, but fate had a way of catching a man. And tonight, whispers from a saloon had tied his name to destiny. The rumors began over cheap bourbon, a couple of ranch hands muttering near the back table. Outlaws, they said, were gathering under a cruel leader named Boone Callahan. Boone's gang was known for leaving smoke in their wake, and the target now was an Apache village tucked near the canyon rim. James leaned against the bar, listening without meaning to, his hand tight around his glass. Something inside him stirred. For years he had ridden alone, never caring about another soul. But the thought of children crying and women chained to wagons was something he could not ignore. The desert stretched endlessly before him, every hoofbeat drumming against the dry earth. James carried little, a Colt revolver with worn grips, a Winchester rifle, and the weight of his own regrets. He had fought in the war a decade earlier, a soldier who had seen too much blood. Since then, he had avoided fights when he could, drifting from town to town, never staying long enough to matter. Yet now, with the sun setting in a blaze of crimson, he felt his old instincts awaken. For the first time in years, he had something worth riding toward. When James reached the edge of the Apache village, the scene cut through his chest. Children laughed as they chased each other around the fire, mothers ground corn into meal, and the air carried the faint scent of mesquite smoke. Peace lived here, fragile and untouched. Yet beyond the canyon rim, evil was stirring, ready to ride down upon these unsuspecting souls. James stopped his horse in the shadows, his jaw set tight. He knew the law wouldn't ride for them. No marshal would come this far into the desert. The only shield between them and death was him. The cowboy dismounted slowly, leading his horse to the cover of rocks. His boots crunched softly on the sand as he scanned the village. He thought of riding on, leaving it all behind as he had always done. But each time he tried to turn away, his eyes caught the sight of children's laughter, innocent and free, and the thought of them facing Boone's cruelty clawed at him. He set his rifle down carefully and checked his revolver, spinning the cylinder before sliding it back into his holster. A storm was coming, and James intended to meet it head-on. He remembered the first time he'd seen Boone Callahan years ago, back when the man was only a thief in Texas. Boone had always been a brute, his eyes dead like a rattlesnake's. Word said his gang now numbered more than 20 riders, hardened men with no conscience. Against such odds, James knew he didn't stand a chance. But the choice wasn't about winning, it was about standing between innocence and evil, no matter the cost. That thought alone fueled his steps as he made his way to the village fire, where an elder sat watching him approach carefully. The elder, his face carved by years of wind and sun, studied James with quiet eyes. James removed his hat and spoke plainly, telling him what he had overheard. At first, there was silence, the kind that weighed heavy with disbelief and fear. Then slowly the elder nodded. He thanked James with words spoken low, yet his expression carried worry. The Apache men were away, hunting deer in the high country, leaving only women, children, and the old behind. If the outlaws came tonight, they would find the village unprotected. James felt the truth strike him harder than any bullet. The women gathered, listening with anxious faces, holding their children close. James stood tall, promising he would help, though his heart raced with doubt. He asked for strong ropes, sharp knives, and anything they could use to set traps around the canyon's entrance. The elder's eyes softened, perhaps recognizing in James a man trying to repay a debt to the world. The children clung to their mothers, peeking at James with wide, fearful eyes. He knelt beside them, his voice steady and calm, promising they would be safe. It wasn't just a vow, it was a burden he fully accepted. As night crept over the desert, the village fire burned low, its glow flickering against the faces of those gathered. James walked the canyon edge, marking where the riders would come. He set snares and stacked rocks, ready to tumble down when the time came. The silence of the desert was broken only by the wind, whispering like ghosts across the sand. He paused, staring at the horizon where darkness thickened. Somewhere out there, Boone and his men were preparing to strike. James pulled his coat tighter around him and whispered to himself, "They'll have to go through me first." Hours passed, each one stretching like a lifetime. James sat near the fire cleaning his rifle, the metallic click echoing softly. He watched as mothers rocked their children to sleep, humming songs meant to chase away fear. His heart ached, reminded of a time long ago when he had held his own little sister during the war, protecting her from the sound of cannons. She had not survived, and that wound had never healed. Tonight felt like redemption, a chance to guard those who could not fight. The burden was heavy, but for James it was the only path left. Far off in the distance, faint hoofbeats began to stir, carried by the night air. James froze, his eyes narrowing toward the sound. The gang was coming. He rose slowly, brushing dust from his coat, and gripped his rifle tight. The Apache women moved silently, herding the children into the shelters James had prepared. The elder placed a hand on James's shoulder, his gaze solemn. "You fight not for yourself, but for us all," he said. James nodded once, swallowing hard. He had never been anyone's hero, but tonight he would stand alone against the storm. The desert held its breath. The first glimmer of torchlight flickered against the horizon. Boone Callahan's riders emerged like shadows, their laughter cruel and sharp as they thundered forward. James crouched low, his rifle steady. He counted them, 20, maybe more. His chest tightened, but fear became fuel. When Boone raised his torch high, ready to signal the attack, James squeezed the trigger. The shot cracked across the canyon, striking Boone's torch from his hand. Sparks rained down and the gang scattered in confusion. The Apache village, silent behind James, waited for his stand. Alone beneath the vast desert sky, James Cartwright prepared to fight. The night was heavy with silence until the ground began to tremble beneath the hooves of the outlaws' horses. Their torches blazed in the darkness, lighting up the canyon like a trail of fire. Boone Callahan rode at the front, his cruel smile glowing in the flames' light. But James Cartwright was waiting. He lay hidden among the rocks, the barrel of his rifle steady, his breath slow. When Boone lifted his torch high to signal the charge, James fired. The torch shattered in Boone's hand, flames scattering across the sand. Chaos erupted, and the fight had begun. Horses screamed as the gang lurched to a halt, confusion breaking their formation. Boone cursed, clutching his burned hand, shouting orders through the smoke. James worked quickly, his Winchester cracking through the night. Each shot was measured, each echo carrying across the canyon walls. Men fell from saddles, their bodies thudding against the earth. The outlaws tried to spot him, but James knew the land better, ducking low between rocks and shadows. For every torch that flickered closer he fired, until fear began to eat at the gang's courage. One man against many, but determination gave him the edge. Behind the canyon walls, the Apache women moved swiftly, guiding children into shelters James had marked earlier. Their whispered prayers floated into the night, blending with the thunder of gunfire. The elder stood watch, his face carved in grim determination, knowing this fight was not only about survival, but honor. James, though outnumbered, fought like a soldier reborn. Memories of war flooded him, battles where he had lost brothers, nights where he had faced cannon fire. Tonight was no different, except now he fought not for flags or generals, but for the innocent laughter he had sworn to protect. The gang regrouped, torches swinging wildly as Boone roared orders. "Flush him out!" he bellowed, his voice cutting through the gunfire. Several riders charged toward the rocks, bullets ricocheting off stone. James slid down into a ravine, his revolver blazing. Close combat erupted, the sharp cracks of his Colt echoing like thunder. One outlaw fell within arm's reach, his pistol clattering to the sand. James's heart pounded, sweat and dust stinging his eyes. He could feel the odds pressing against him, but his will held firm. This was his stand, his redemption. Tonight he would not break, no matter the cost. James ducked behind boulders as bullets whizzed past, sparks spraying from stone. He reloaded with practiced hands, every motion smooth and deliberate. One outlaw crept close, knife gleaming in the torchlight. James swung his revolver, striking the man across the jaw before pulling the trigger point blank. The sound split the night, and silence followed. Boone's men hesitated, unnerved by James's defiance. "It's just one man," Boone snarled, but doubt flickered in their eyes. They had expected an easy raid, not a lone gunslinger standing his ground like an army. Fear spread through them faster than fire through dry brush. The Apache women, though fearful, found courage in James's stand. Following his instructions, they had set small traps, ropes stretched across paths, stones piled high to tumble at the right moment. As the outlaws pressed closer, a horse tripped and sent its rider sprawling, followed by another caught in a hidden snare. Panic erupted as confusion grew. From the shadows, the women struck quickly, dragging down fallen torches and dousing flames. Boone's men felt the desert turn against them, every corner hiding resistance. And at the heart of it all, James's relentless shots echoed like the heartbeat of the canyon. Boone himself finally rode forward, his revolver flashing in the firelight. He had scars on his face and madness in his eyes. "You can't stop us, Cowboy," he shouted, firing wildly. Bullets ripped past James, shattering stone. James steadied himself, rifle aimed. The two men locked eyes across the burning night, predator against predator. Boone spurred his horse forward, charging with a roar. James pulled the trigger, the shot grazing Boone's arm and spinning him from his saddle. The gang gasped, their leader sprawled in the dirt. For the first time, Boone Callahan looked vulnerable, and fear spread like wildfire. Desperate, the outlaws fired blindly, their shots rattling across the canyon. James darted between shadows, firing back with calm precision. He felt the strain in his muscles, the ache in his chest, but his spirit burned stronger than his body. Every outlaw that fell brought another breath of safety for the villagers. Boone scrambled to his feet, blood staining his sleeve, rage twisting his face. He called for retreat, but half his gang was already scattering into the desert night. James advanced slowly, revolver in hand, each step carrying the weight of unshakable resolve. This battle would end with him. The final standoff came near the canyon's edge. Boone, cornered and bleeding, snarled like a wolf. "You should have stayed out of this, Cowboy," he hissed. James said nothing, his revolver aimed steady. For a heartbeat, silence ruled the desert. Then Boone lunged, drawing his pistol. Two shots cracked at once, echoing into eternity. Boone staggered back, clutching his chest, his pistol falling from his grasp. He collapsed into the dust, lifeless, his shadow swallowed by the night. The canyon fell still. James lowered his weapon, his breath ragged, the fire in his eyes dimming at last. The fight was over. The outlaws who survived fled into the darkness, their courage broken, their leader dead. Smoke drifted across the canyon, carrying the stench of gunpowder. James stood amidst it all, weary but unyielding, his body marked by the night's battle. Slowly, the Apache women emerged, their eyes filled with awe. Children clung to their mothers, peeking at the man who had shielded them from death. The elder approached, laying a weathered hand on James's shoulder. "You fought for us when no one else would," he said quietly. James, still catching his breath, only nodded. He had no words, only the weight of silence. As dawn broke, the sky blushed with soft gold, washing the desert clean of darkness. The village gathered around James, offering water, bread, and gratitude. He sat quietly, exhaustion heavy in his bones, but a small smile tugged at his lips. For the first time in years, he felt something more than loneliness. He had protected lives, saved a people, and in doing so, saved himself. The children laughed again, their voices rising into the morning air. James Cartwright, once a nameless drifter, had become more than a cowboy. He was now a protector and a legend carved into history. Long after the dust of that night settled, stories of the lone cowboy spread across the frontier. Travelers spoke of a man who faced a gang alone, who risked everything to protect an Apache village when the law turned its back. Around campfires, his name was whispered like a prayer: James Cartwright, the man who stood against darkness. But James himself rode on quietly, never seeking praise. The land was wide, the West unforgiving, and his journey was not yet done. Still, wherever he rode, the legend followed. The cowboy who risked everything had finally found his purpose.